Scooby-Doo! Wait, what is it? Everyone's heard of the show Velma by now. Most people call it an annoying, pandering, directionless mess that probably shouldn't exist. But is that necessarily true? It might be. Listen, I'm all for giving new cartoons a fair chance. It's pretty rare for me to look at a trailer or something and think, well, that'll be horrible. I like to watch what I'm critiquing before giving my honest opinion, so that I don't just join the herd of people saying that it's the worst TV show ever. Why did they make this? Who let this happen? Did you guys hear they're making an Among Us TV show, by the way? That show's probably gonna be horrible though, right? There's no way. Velma is obviously based on the character Velma from Scooby-Doo, but this version of her is also very clearly its own thing. Having only watched some small clips here and there, it's clear to me that the main issue with the show seems to be what it likes to call its humor and storytelling. Now, obviously, whether you enjoy it or not is subjective. Some people are masochists, and that's fine. But the fact is, despite what we'll call a mixed reception, Velma is slated to release a second season in like a week or something. A lot of people have no idea how this happened. A lot of people seem very angry about it. But I thought it'd be a fun time to look over Velma's first episode in full to see what it's all about. This show's probably gonna suck, but I know you guys love watching me suffer, so it's my gift to you, I guess. So without further ado, grab your copy of Pokemon Platinum for the Nintendo DS, and let's watch what may very well be the spin-off everyone wants to forget, Velma. Our story begins with Velma herself introducing us, the viewer, to the episode. She monologues about how this is basically her origin story. There's a couple things this intro teaches us right away. One, this show does its best to be meta. It talks directly to the viewer and talks about real world issues instead of issues it made up in its universe. Like she talks about Hollywood tropes tied to gender or something here. It's a pretty weird way to start your show. And two, Velma is quite the character. She badmouths film in general here, and she also talks trash about Fred and Daphne, who obviously we all love from the original series. So this all happens within the first 40 seconds of the show, by the way. We haven't even seen a character yet.
This is my story, told my way, and it starts with a murder, bitch.
That was a cool moment, holy shit. On to the interesting parts now. We see someone in a changing room that looks like it's owned by Asmongold.
That's obviously Wendy's chili.
We also see two cockroaches just doing their thing on the floor for some reason. I guess that's kind of funny because you probably didn't know what to expect yet. Speaking of, I should probably warn everyone watching this video that I usually cover TV shows that are more or less made for younger audiences. Overanalyzing something like SpongeBob is always a fun time. But disclaimer, this show is not made for kids, and it does its absolute best to remind you of that fact like every minute of its runtime. I'm doing something a little different today. F it. Why not? Anyway, we find out that the girl in the changing room, her name is Daphne. You know, like from Scooby-Doo. But unlike the original series, in this show, she's some popular girl who's kind of mean to everyone. Remember, this show made it very clear that it hates TV tropes. Anyway, the next scene is a shower scene. I'm not kidding. I've blurred and blocked most parts of it for obvious reasons. This entire 1 minute long scene is basically just a bunch of naked girls talking about how if this were a TV show, them being naked would be pretty wacky or something. This show is very clever. Anyway, Daphne gets into a fight or something, and then someone shows up in a hood and just whacks Daphne across the head with a wooden cane, I guess. This person turns out to be Velma, who's the main character of the show, obviously. Listen, I'm not gonna sugarcoat this. This show is already extremely exhausting to watch. I know hating this thing is nothing new at this point, but already half of this episode's runtime has been quirky commentary about filmmaking, and the other half has just been a bunch of naked girls because oh, I don't know, it's funny that they're naked or something, I don't know. Also, not to mention, we've almost had 2 actual murders. Like, this is the first 2 minutes of your TV show. I know people recognize the names already from Scooby-Doo, but how about you build any sort of personality before making us choose a side here? Just my 2 cents, whatever. That doesn't matter. Anyway, in a silly twist that has nothing to do with the show so far, Velma opens her locker and someone named Brenda turns out to be dead inside it. We don't know who Brenda is at all. It's overly graphic with her head being cut open as she falls on the floor. And worst of all, the scary moment is immediately cut off by a quirky remark from Velma.
She has no brain! Oh, I'm not dissing her. She has no brain!
Wow, the writer's really working overtime with this one. This is when we actually get the title card of the show. Now, the way that I've explained everything so far, I might sound overly harsh on this show right now. And to be honest, in concept, this opening honestly isn't that bad. You can definitely make this work somehow. It even reminded me of the opening of the original Scream movie, which I think is actually like a really good opening in a movie. The problem so far is that this movie tries to be so many different things and succeeds at none of them. The comedy basically boils down to, I referenced this thing in real life, now laugh. Listen, I hate this term because it physically hurts me, but it very clearly shows off its woke humor on its sleeve. And the problem isn't that it's woke humor, the problem is that it's not subtle, and they do it to the point that they basically just parody themselves. And the worst part is that you can make this comedy work. It doesn't matter who you align with politically, okay, a lot of shows have done this before. Anyway, I forgot I was watching a TV show for a second. Velma is now in the interrogation room, I guess, because she found the body in her locker. She's already handcuffed to the table, which I think might be illegal, but I don't know, I'm not from the US. During this scene, we find out that Velma's mom went missing 2 years ago, and these detective characters that walked in have failed to make any progress in finding her so far. I wonder if that will be the overlying story of the entire TV show. I have no idea. Let's find out. Velma tries to leave the interrogation because she's being a little cranky, so the cops do the most logical thing and both whip out their firearms, because, you know, America, I guess. Turns out Velma is a full-fledged suspect in this murder. I'm not gonna question it, just roll with it. Anyway, long story short, the detective girls believe Velma is innocent, but in order to prove that she's innocent, Velma needs to solve the mystery of who actually murdered Brenda. There's a lot of stuff wrong with this plot and this scene in general, but I've already ranted enough in this video, so I'll let it slide. I don't really care. On the way out of the police station, Velma runs into Fred. Everyone knows Fred. He's the self-appointed leader from Scooby-Doo. Of course, in this show, though, he's just some good-looking idiot who's obsessed with himself. He's super rude here, but despite this, Velma still has goo goo gaga eyes for Fred. I don't want to say that that contradicts Velma's entire character up until this point, but yeah, anyway. Daphne comes in and tells Fred that Brenda died, and he's pretty bummed about it. Daphne also tries to put her hand down Fred's pants out of nowhere. Like, you guys are right in front of a cop station. You know they have cameras, right? But who am I kidding? Maybe they don't know that, because at the end of the day, they're just two really popular, really good-looking people. And remember, this show hates TV stereotypes, by the way.
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
Also, figured I should mention this. Fred is voiced by Gelnn Howerton, who's best known as Dennis from Always Sunny. He's actually a phenomenal and hilarious actor, and although I'm extremely happy to see him get roles in newer stuff nowadays, it does make me a little sad that he's a part of the show in some way. He's still the GOAT though, he's the best. Also, I should mention, if you haven't guessed by now, Velma is voiced by Mindy Kaling, and it's very apparent, because this entire Velma character is basically just Mindy herself. This is a criticism I've heard time and time again. Velma isn't a character at all in the show, it's basically just Mindy in cartoon form, which on paper and execution sounds like a horrible idea. I liked her stuff in The Office, honestly. I thought she was funny there, but you know, this isn't The Office. Now is it? So later that night, Velma is arguing with her dad about some fries or something.
Don't you raise your eyebrows at me, Steve Harvey. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
All right, Steve Harvey got me.
Velma,
Oh, lie.
I love it. I'm a lawyer, so trust me when I say
Starvey? This entire shot of the show is just to bring up Velma's missing mother again. I guess ever since she went missing, Velma has been kind of a weirdo, which is why people think she murdered Brenda, logically. There's some jokes here about how her dad moved on and got a waitress pregnant or something. They aren't really that funny. But we skip to a diner now where Brenda's having her funeral reception. And I'm not gonna lie, this is probably the only part in the show that got a decent giggle out of me. It's not really that funny, but it made me laugh.
If you're horny, let's do it.
Is that a Genuine song? That's hilarious, actually. Anyway, this entire shot is just for that one joke, basically. So Velma is outside the diner now, which is when she runs into Fred again. He's having a nervous breakdown or something because his dad doesn't approve of him being a man, I think. Fred doesn't consider himself a man because he doesn't have a beard, so he's sad about it. It's in this scene where we see Velma recite her most iconic lines of all time, like Zam and Dilf City. But it's not all useless because we finally get some sort of flashback from Velma, which gives us a bit of insight on her mother and the disappearance surrounding her. Velma explains that her mother smoking cigarettes in secret was the first mystery she ever solved, and ever since that moment, she was hooked. She was hooked on solving mysteries, not smoking tobacco. Anyway, it looks like Velma and her mom actually did have a good relationship until one Christmas morning when her mom left early to get a Christmas present for her daughter, never to be seen again. We find out the detectives from earlier eventually found her car alongside a present inside it, but the mother was nowhere to be found. How spooky. Also, I want to mention, throughout this entire episode, Velma has been getting these panic attack moments where she's getting these very scary hallucinations. It's usually these weird zombie hands that grab her or something and blame her for her mother's disappearance. What is my melee? What is my melee? The hallucinations didn't really make sense up until this point, until Velma finally explains the hallucinations are her guilt and trauma taking over her body. Basically, whenever she's about to solve a mystery, it reminds her of her mother's disappearance, and she goes into panic mode. It's actually kind of a cool way to represent a panic attack in a visual form, and for that, I will award this TV show half a gold star. Only 9.5 stars left to go. Anyway, a car shows up after the story, and in it, who else but Shaggy? Kind of. This guy's dressed like Shaggy, but his name is Norville in the show. That's what everyone calls him. That's his name in Velma's phone. I'm actually a little confused by this because his name is definitely Norville, right? That's fine. But when you Google him, the name Shaggy is what pops up. I'm not sure if that has something to do with the show later and that's a spoiler or not. It just makes things very confusing right now for me, so. Norville's whole thing is that he has a huge crush on Velma, I think, and just wants to solve the mystery with her. They also do this bit where Norville very clearly says he does not like doing drugs, which I think is supposed to be funny because Shaggy in the original Scooby-Doo has always been known to like smoke weed or something. Obviously in the original Shaggy doesn't ever do that, but it's pretty commonly accepted amongst viewers that Shaggy gets kind of high with Scoob all the time.
I'm Mary Jane.
Like that is my favorite name.
Really?
So I guess you'd expect this one to also be a stoner, is the joke. Anyway, there's this big setup to the plot of this episode that's kind of annoying to explain, so I'll be quick. Norville tells Velma that he thinks the diner place from earlier is suspicious, so a couple days ago he gave Brenda his camera so she can go take pictures of anything weird going on, and since Brenda died shortly after doing that, and the waitress from earlier who works at the diner got a new camera recently, he thinks the waitress girl was the one who did it, and then like stole the camera, I guess. I don't know if I explained that properly, honestly. Doesn't matter, dude. Just, he suspects the waitress.
I thought you were like suggesting a date.
A date? You wish. What?
How long is this scene? What is going on? So Velma goes home and checks the waitress's camera, but then almost immediately gets one of those scary hallucination things. Like, this one's actually kind of terrifying. I won't lie. I'll give it that. The animation rocks. After the hallucination, it turns out there's no evidence on the camera, so the waitress lady is cleared, I guess. This is when Velma trauma dumps for a bit. Velma gets kind of depressed, even more than she already was. So the next day, she decides to do a complete 180 on her character. She acts all stupid. She dresses like a popular kid, which for this show just means she dresses very inappropriately. Also, every main character in the show is a high school student, I think, by the way. I thought they were older for some reason, but they aren't. I don't know, just wanted to mention it for no reason. While everyone's praising her, this one girl calls Velma's changing character out, and because of this, everyone switches sides and starts booing her and throwing random things at her. Books, soccer balls, tomatoes, you know, that sort of thing. Someone even decides to throw an actual paper cutter at her, which is when Fred jumps in out of nowhere and throws it back, and I'm not kidding here, it cuts off someone's leg entirely. Like, slices it clean off, just out of nowhere. It's not on his body anymore. Sure, this scene's a little random, but I also think it's a perfect example of how this show has no idea what it wants to be. For the majority of this episode so far, the actions of the characters are in a realm of possibility. Like, sure, each character says and does stupid things, but everything they say and do is humanly possible. But then this one guy gets his leg cut off, and while Fred is making a speech about something, this dude is just like bleeding out, listening, you know, just chilling. It just comes out of nowhere. It doesn't make sense. Nothing else happens like this. I don't understand. Fred decides to defend Velma here for some reason, which is important, I guess. And then a couple moments later, Velma is talking to Daphne in the bathroom when it's mentioned randomly that although Daphne and Fred have been dating for over a year, Fred still hasn't taken his pants off with her. Riveting storytelling. This is cinema right here.
We've been dating for a year and he still won't even take his pants off.
A year? He gay?
I haven't heard that rumor. I have heard.
What am I watching, dude? We find out that Brenda may have secretly photographed Fred while he was in the bathroom at the diner at some point, which actually does make Fred a little sus. So Velma decides to go to Fred's house. Obviously, it's weird that Daphne would just randomly mention like not seeing Fred pantsless ever, but they did have that moment in front of the cop station at the very beginning, so it kind of ties in together, I guess. So like I said, Velma decides to go to Fred's house, but since she's close to solving a mystery, she has a huge panic attack. So big, in fact, that she's actually about to like get a heart attack and die, I think is what's insinuated. The animation's really cool here again. It's actually a cool scene. Just trust me. She gets on the phone with Norville, and because he's super scared that she's gonna die, he reveals his feelings for her in the emotional climax of the episode. But of course, this conversation makes Velma laugh, which I guess knocks her out of this panic attack. Why I gotta do Shaggy like that? The whole scene is kind of long, and it's probably just there to remind you that if you ever have serious panic attacks and it's ruining your life, just think of a funny joke, okay? Put on Mindy's latest comedy special, and everything should be fine. Obviously, you probably shouldn't do that. If you suffer from actual panic attacks or anything related to it, please talk to your doctor or something. It could be very serious. And also, do not watch Mindy's comedy special under any circumstances. So Velma's inside Fred's house now, which is when we get the big reveal. I won't sugarcoat anything. Turns out it was Fred who killed Brenda. It's a little anticlimactic, honestly, but okay. Turns out the reason for this is because Brenda took a photo of Fred's perfectly shaven legs. But plot twist, they aren't shaven at all. Fred just hasn't hit puberty yet and doesn't want people to know. I'm not kidding. That's the story of this episode. It turns out Fred's dad is ashamed of his son because he's a late bloomer, which is why he was talking about him earlier in the show. And then Brenda found all this out, so Fred just straight up went PKing IRL and hit an 86. It's a very intense moment because Fred is about to do the same thing to Velma, but then the two detectives from the very beginning shoot both of Fred's kneecaps and he falls to the ground in pain. He should have asked that one guy from earlier for advice on how to handle pain. Could have used it here, I guess. So bloody and all, Fred is getting arrested when all of a sudden, another plot twist. Fred says that he didn't kill Brenda at all. She found out his secret, but he just paid her to keep quiet because he's rich or whatever. And he was just gonna pay Velma to do the same thing. So it's just a big misunderstanding. He didn't kill anyone.
The rules feel
feel a bit muddy.
Muddy? Oh, sorry I'm not a drunk on the verge of losing custody like every other woman solving murders these days.
What is she saying, bro? Well, I don't understand. What the hell is she saying? I don't understand. Because of this, Velma and Norville just leave the house. We don't really see what happens to Fred at all. Like, I don't know, we just forget about him for the rest of the episode. Despite everything that's happened, Velma says that she's still very dedicated to find out what happened to her mother, which is when Norville opens a nearby garbage bin to find Krista, who is someone from the very beginning, I think, maybe? I'm honestly not sure who this is. And that's the very first episode of Velma. Yep, it just ends like that. I don't know, it ends quickly, and that's it. So there you go. Was it really that bad? Listen, I know it's easy to hate on this show, and I know I'm not really breaking new ground here by saying this, but yeah, it's pretty bad. I've only watched this episode for this video specifically, so I don't know if it gets any better, to be fair. And also, like I said, the animation is actually cool looking sometimes, so the quality of the writing is by far the worst part about the show, at least for me. I know comedy is subjective and all that, but genuinely, as much as I hate the word cringe, my face was stuck in a cringe position for like 80% of this entire episode, which it just wasn't pleasant. Okay, I didn't like it. But at the end of the day, there is a second season coming out soon, so the creators probably just don't care. They're making lots of money either way. Why would they give a shit? And who really cares? It's just a cartoon, even if it is a cartoon that does its hardest to just be offensive all the time. But yeah, that's the end of the video. Subscribe, like, and leave a comment if you can. It helps a bunch. Become a member if you want to support me in that way and can afford it. Thank you to all my members on the screen right now. I can't thank you enough for choosing to stick around. I know this video is a little different than what I normally do, but fuck it. I like trying different stuff now and again. Expect the usual video coming soon. Paula Abdul scores this one a solid 2 politics out of 20. And yeah, thanks for watching.
Dating for a year and he still won't even take his pants off.
How long is this scene?